Functions. That is the topic of today's video, the 8th video in the Python for Beginners series. Now, we've all used functions before, right? We've used the print function, the input function, and maybe even the len function. Let's take a look at how we use those functions in Python. First, we said print, and within brackets, we gave it some value to print. For example, a string which says hello world. And when we run this program, we see that it has printed hello world onto the screen. Now what we just did was we called the function, right? And there are really two steps to using functions in Python. The first step is defining the function, and the second step is calling the function. But we didn't really define anything to use the print function, did we? We just said print hello world in brackets, and that is calling the function. We only call the function, we never defined the function. Now why is that? That's because print is a predefined function in Python, which means that the developers of Python have already written all the code necessary to decide which pixels on the screen to light up in order to print hello world onto the screen the way it is. Now let's take a look at how we can define our own functions and call them in Python. In order to define our own function, the first thing we need to think about is what that function does. Alright? Let's pick an extremely simple example to just understand how defining and calling a function works. Let's say I want to print hello world using our own function. Okay? And I'm going to name that function as print hello world with underscores, and I'm going to call that function. Now when I run this program, nothing happens. Why? That's because it says print hello world is not defined. Well, of course, we've just called a function which is not already defined. Alright? And in order to call this function, we need to define the function before we call it. How do we define functions in Python? We use the def keyword, def, and then give it the name of the function that we want to define. In my case, I named the function as print hello world with underscores. Now don't worry about the brackets here, I'm going to get back to what those mean. Then a colon, just like we did for if statements and loops, enter, and PyCharm automatically indents the code for you. Now here, whatever code you write, it will get executed when the print hello world function is called. Alright, so let's just say print hello world. Now let's run the program. There it is, hello world printed onto the screen. Now we've just achieved the exact same thing by using our own function, which we call the print hello world function. But can we pass in values into this print hello world and make it print whatever we want? Let's see if we can do that. For that, I'm just going to name this function as custom print. And again, there's really no need to do this. I'm just doing it as an extremely simple example to make you guys understand how functions work. Alright? And then I'm going to call it with some value. Let's say I want it to print Python for beginners. Alright? And again, as you'd expect, when we run this program, it says custom print is not defined. That's because we need to define this function. Let's define it, and remember the definition of the function must always be before calling the function. Alright? Because calling a function that's not defined yet does not make any sense. So in order to define this function, let's use the def keyword, def, and use the name of the function, which is custom print in my case. And now the magic happens between these brackets. Whatever value that you provide while calling the function goes in through these brackets and pop out of these brackets. Now we need to give a variable name here that's going to store the value that we gave in while calling the function. I'm just going to name this variable print value because it stores the value that we wanted to print. colon and come down, and the code that must be executed when I call this custom print function is just printing whatever input I give into it, just like the print function. And I'm going to say print value without quotes because we want to print the value of the variable print value. And when we run this program now, you should see that it's printed Python for beginners. Now let's take a look at a more complex function. Alright, let's see how we would create a function that would take in two numbers and add them together. Okay, I'm going to name this function as add numbers, and I'm going to give it two numbers to add together, like 5 and 6 for example. Then I'm going to define this function using the def keyword, add numbers, and here we need to use two variables because we're supplied the function with two inputs, right? So we need two variables to store those two inputs. I'm going to name the first variable x and the second variable y, colon, come down, and I'm just going to say print x plus y, right? This function prints the sum of both the inputs onto the screen. When I hit enter, it prints 11, which is the sum of 5 and 6. However, let's say that we want the value of the sum of 5 and 6 to be stored in another variable called z. How will we do this? For this, we use a return statement. So instead of printing x plus y, we would say return x plus y. X plus y, right? What this is going to do is it's going to compute the value of x and y, and it's going to send it back through the call of this function and put it in the variable z. When we run this, nothing will happen, of course, because all we did was assign the value of z to be equal to 5 plus 6. We can easily test this by using a print statement and printing z onto the screen. When you run that, you can see that 11 is printed onto the screen. That's it for this video, guys. I know it can be a lot to take in at first, but I recommend practicing it a few times and also rewatching this video a few times maybe to really understand the concept. And if you have any questions, as usual, you can put them down in the comment section and I'll get back to you. So see you in the next video where I'll be starting about object-oriented programming. And until then, remember, anybody can code.